Good evening all and welcome. Feeling hungry? Perhaps it's time to order a pizza or Uber Eats or something like that. But who knows, it might go terribly wrong for the person receiving the food or the delivery driver. Let's find out together. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My father had many jobs in his life. He's been a veterinarian, a meat processor, which is a cross between a butcher and a slaughterhouse owner, a farmer, a power plant executive, and a preacher. When he was running his meat processing plant, he used to do home deliveries for some of his customers. One day, when I was around 7 or 8, he did a home delivery on his way home from the plant. He came in and got cleaned up. As we sat down for dinner, he started talking about the weird delivery he'd just made. The house he went to was owned by a young couple with a son about 5 years older than I was. When Dad came by with the delivery, they invited him in. My dad's a really friendly guy, never meets a stranger, and never turns down an invitation to come in and chat and share a beer. He's talking with the couple about their son. He remarks that the boy was really strange, but he chalked it up to the kid likely going through puberty. But he noticed that he really thought it was weird that the parents never left the boy alone, anywhere into the house. If he went into his room, the mum got up and went with him, or his dad would stand just outside the door. The other thing he noted is that every door had a deadbolt on it, the deadbolt that needed a key to operate. Every door, closets, bathrooms, bedrooms, every door. Dad thought it was strange. Strange enough that he brought it up with a friend who worked at DCFS, but nothing was ever done about it. They just said they'd keep an eye on it. He also knew the boy's doctor, and he said something to him about it. The doc said he'd keep an eye on it too, but again, there was never anything done that I know of. So, 10 years pass, and the boy is a senior in high school. By all accounts, he's a normal, quiet teen. Then, one morning, we turn on the news to see this normal, quiet teen had taken a .22 and put a round into the back of both of his parents' skulls. Finally, when the kid was asked why he did it, he said he flunked a class and was afraid his parents wouldn't let him go camping with his friends that weekend. His attorneys had evaluated. There were questions about how the house was arranged, but there was zero evidence of abuse. The really creepy thing is, there seemed to be no sign of struggle by the parents. Mum and Dad were sitting right next to each other. He said he shot one, then the other, but there was no running away, no ducking or hiding, just bang, bang, and both were slumped over on the couch. My dad often wonders if the parents knew their child was a disturbed person, and the locks and behavior around him were designed not for abuse or anything sinister, but to rather protect themselves from him. My very first car was a dark green 2000s Volkswagen Jetta. It was the most basic of basics when it came to cars, no options whatsoever except for an automatic transmission. It was $300, slow, dumpy, no right headlight, drove straight with the steering wheel practically sideways, and let out a cloud of white smoke when it started. Every stereotype of a poor high schooler's car you can think of, and my car was no exception. Despite it being a piece of crap, I loved that car. I drove it every chance I had, and I don't think a day went by I didn't drive it. I named it Thunderbuddy. She was my baby, my beautiful green baby, but Volkswagens from that generation, Jettas especially, had a pretty bad flaw in the automatic transmission. I'm not sure exactly what caused it, but essentially the transformations gradually get worse and worse until the car will not shift into third gear, and there's not a thing you can do from there. So a couple of weeks after Halloween 2019, I was going around 30 miles an hour when the engine suddenly roared and the car wouldn't speed up. I feared the worst, and my fears were justified. My dad, a mechanic, didn't even have a hope for my baby. She was gone already, and so much to my dismay, I started looking for a new car. It only took about a month for us to find her, A dark green 1999 Volkswagen Jetta. Exactly like my old car, but with all the trimmings. She was faster, had heated leather seats, auto windows, auto sunroof, everything. All except automatic transmission. I knew how to drive manual, so it was perfect. I had a new baby. From the crackhead neighborhood girl to Scarlett Johansson. At least in my eyes, I loved the car even harder, named it Little Boy and was happy. Okay, now for the story. But I need a few things to explain first in order to really gather the context. Firstly, when you have a manual car, you cannot leave it in gear and take your foot off the clutch. If you do, it will stall, which is bad. So if you do leave your car in gear, you need to turn the engine off before taking your foot off the clutch. If you don't want to turn the car off or have it turn itself off, you need to pull the handbrake on or it will roll away. Take a guess what was the only real broken thing on my car, and this is the point the story takes place. I started working as a pizza delivery driver in a smaller growing town in Michigan. It was good money, but every once in a while I delivered to an incredibly sketchy place, and I've had a few shotguns pulled on me. One night about 2 months ago, I was delivering on a Friday. Usually Fridays are very busy, but this day was a little slow. So when the delivery came at 8:30, a half an hour before we closed, I jumped on it. I realized I was 7.1 miles away, so all of the closing jobs would be done by the time I got back, and I would have been able to leave immediately. It was way out of town in a wood-surrounded neighborhood, but again, no work when I got back to the store, so it seemed like a good deal to me. And I'm all about those sorts of deals, and so I climbed into my car and went to drive the 7.1 miles. As I pulled up to the house, I began to get a bad feeling. The house was in a small trailer park type neighborhood next to a lake, the kind that the houses are all a good distance apart, likely with a drug problem, and it was completely dark. No lights on anywhere, and there was a single car in the driveway and an open window on the side of the house. I pulled in behind the car in the driveway and sat there for a moment. Something was off. By the house being completely dark, I mean there wasn't so much as a nightlight that I could see. Usually when I deliver to a dark house, there's at least a light on upstairs or something that would signal someone being awake and waiting for their pizza. But the household seemed dead. Nevertheless, I put the car in gear, turned off the engine and grabbed the small, cheapest pizza we had and got out. Without my headlights on, there was nothing. I could barely see the house. The only light was from the dim moon. I walked onto the porch and passed the big open window to the front door. As I reached the front door, I saw it. The door was slightly cracked open, and just enough for me to see into the void of the house. Thinking of every single horror movie I'd ever seen, I said aloud, "Screw this," and hurried back to my car. I'm a tall, well-built looking guy, but despite my wide shoulders and baggy hoodie, I'm frail and can hardly fight off a small dog. I got into my car and turned on the engine. My headlights illuminated the house, and almost simultaneously, the living room lights behind the big door open window lit up. A single guy looked out and walked to the front door. I cussed to myself and weighed my options. If I went to the door, I could die. If I noped out of there, I could 110% be fired. That meant no new car part, no gas money, no cute dates with my girl. Just sitting there at home doing virtual schoolwork. It was a stupid choice, I know, but I grabbed the pizza and opened my door, making a choice I'm damn glad I made. I took the car out of gear and climbed out, mostly so my engine would still be running, so that if I needed, I could run back and immediately take off. I walked to the door. There was the man. He had opened it the rest of the way. As I got closer, I got a good look at him. I'm not to judge a person based on their physical appearance, but this guy's head was clean shaven and covered in tattoos. He was wearing a pair of grey jeans and a white tank top. He had a scowl on his face and was staring at me dead in the eyes. I looked past him for a moment into the house, which was completely empty. As I got close enough that I started opening the pizza bag, he began reaching around his waist. I stopped. He was staring at me with the most evil grin I'd ever seen. I knew in that moment that I was about to die. I had always heard your life seems to flash before your eyes, and I thought about my girl, that she wouldn't know what happened. My work would stop delivering upon my disappearance, assuming that my body was never found. My dad would regret telling me he was happy for me for landing this job. God save thee. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of gravel under tires. My only pathetically small chance of escape was rolling away, and I didn't even look back at the car to know that. Remember, the part of my car that was damaged was the handbrake. I stared at the man, and was about to say, "Screw you," when he looked back to my car. Then I heard the sound of the car rolling. It was getting closer. The guy's eyes went from the driveway to behind me. I finally looked over my shoulder. My car had rolled backwards and had come to a smooth stop near the mailbox of the house. I looked back at the guy who had a nervous look. He looked back at me and scowled again, and took his hand from around his waist. He reached into his front pocket and took out $12 and handed it to me. I gave him the pizza and watched him slam the door shut. I ran back to my car, practically tore the door open, trying to get in. I looked back at the house and the man was standing in the front window staring at me. You better believe I nearly spun those tires all the way to get out of there. I kept glancing at my mirrors until I started driving under some streetlights. It was easily the scariest moment I've ever had. As soon as I got back to my store, I told my boss about it, and she called the police. We never heard anything about it. I assumed they went to the house and only found a small cheese pizza, and I started carrying a knife on me at all times, and my boss is considering getting trackers for our pizza bags. Only recently did I realize this is a sort of butterfly effect. I thought it was the worst thing ever that my transmission went out. I cursed Volkswagen for designing such a terrible automatic transmission, but if that transmission still worked, then I would have still had that car when this happened, and I would have put the car in park and it would have sat there while whatever would have happened to me happened. I've zero doubt in my mind that that man was planning on murdering me. So crappy German engineering saved my life from being murdered. I was the day driver at a pizza place I was working at. On my usual grind, I hit the second house of my double and knock on the door. Oh, and it was an online order. So I get to the door, really crappy house in a nice neighborhood, but they had some really good cars. I knock and wait about a minute. And then someone just starts yelling, "Who the hell ordered pizza?" So I get a little nervous, thinking that I went to the wrong house. I hear in the background a really subtle voice say, "I did." And I'm invited inside, which I don't want to do, seeing as I had about $350 in cash on me. The dude's persistent, so I walk in and he leads me into the kitchen. As I turn into the living room / kitchen area, I see a girl who appeared to be roughly 21 in age, but had the appearance of being hit by a truck while lumping on the couch with a needle in her arm. Instantly, I wanted to run. I'd never seen anyone do heroin before, and I really didn't want to stay to see what happens. The guy tells me to put the pizzas on the counter and then begins yelling, "How are we going to pay for these?" Me crapping myself, I wanted to say that they were free, but then he pulls out a wad of cash. There was probably thousands of dollars there. I'm sweating. He pulls out guns as well and leaves them on the counter and gives me $50 on a $19 order and says to keep the change as I turn and run the hell out of there. His buddies then come in through the back door, say they got the hookup on something, and start smoking it right there and then. Me, innocent 18-year-old from the nicest part in Texas, was so scared they were just going to shoot me on the spot. I get back to my car and do about 100 back to the store, and blocked them from ever ordering from us again. I deliver for a restaurant in town, Angelo's Pizza. It's the name and some of the best pizza in town they have. The nights aren't always busy, and I have a few minutes to kill here and there between deliveries, so I bring my laptop to work. I do music, writing, and occasionally play chess to fill in the gaps. It was a Saturday night, and surprisingly it wasn't too busy. At around 11 PM, a delivery is ready. My boss hands me the food and I walk out the back door to my car. A short 7-minute drive is fueled by the delicious aroma of fried mushrooms, Canadian bacon pizza, and the screams of my music, which gives me a short adrenaline rush and hypes me to the last stop of the night. I arrive at the address. It's the Heritage Inn, the only hotel in our town of about 9,000. The place is located on the edge of town and is a casual-style, 2-floor hotel with a not-so-vibrant dull appeal. The building is made up of regular drab bricks, spaced with normal boring windows every few feet, and the roof is shingled with a dark brown. At night it looks even duller, and tonight the parking lot is next to empty, but is filled with a few half-dimmed light posts, giving it an unnerving feeling. The feeling that makes me want to strategically place my car keys between my fingers, just in case. I pull up to the entrance, which has the most appealing feature to the outside of the building, a 9-foot overhang. I enter the hotel through a single door and then into the concierge's room. I go up to the girl to let her know I'm heading up, and I struggle to read the smudge writing, Room 101. I tell her. To the right of the desk is a door leading to the most eye-catching feature of the entire hotel, the pool. It looks magnificent at night, when it's vacant and calm, with the dim light reflecting off the water on the beige walls. It's almost a surreal and eerie environment, and yet it seems so inviting. I go down the hallway, past the out-of-date vending machines and past the dark and noisy laundry room. The hall is long and not very brightly lit. Like everything else, it seemed. Fortunately, the door to the stairs is soon after the laundry room directly to the right. As I'm walking up the stairway, I can't help but think about the story I heard of this very same hotel. Whether it was factual or just a story, it still gives me a bone-chilling feeling. A murder took place here. One of the maids went on her daily walkthrough, to which room I don't know, and found the sheets of both beds soaked in blood. The police were informed, but no one was found in the room, nor were any bodies discovered in the hotel. There was more to the story, but I couldn't remember anything, probably due to me terrified of the nature and the atmosphere that the hotel had to offer this night. Either way, all that kept passing through my mind were images of a corpse rotting away under some bed or under the floor. I near the top of the stairs, and I see the room number 101 through the glass window. A feeling of relief passes over me, knowing I won't have to go down the next darkened hallway. I open the door into the hallway and stand in front of the room. I look around me at both ends of the hall to reassure myself I'm not alone. I knock on the door, and I wait a few seconds as I carefully balance the pizza and bag with one arm and the order ticket in the other hand. I hear a mumbled voice approach the door. As the door slowly creaks open, a man appears. An instant flashback to Jurassic Park races in my head, as the man bore a striking similarity to John Hammond, both age and appearance being around the age of 60 with white hair and a beard, and a round face with glasses. The man is on the phone and opens the door all the way. He makes a waving gesture, informing me to come inside. As I get a good view of the entire room, and I'm just about to take a step into the room, I notice something that is in no way in the realm of a normal hotel room, and I abruptly halt my stride. 3 people in total I see. The first is the John Hammond doppelganger at the door, who is now seemingly pretending to talk on the phone as he hides his head behind the door. The second is a woman who could possibly be a wife or girlfriend of the old man. She looks like she's in her 50s. She is sitting on a chair directly across the room from the door, looking up, watching TV in the corner. The third is a girl, who I am 100% sure is within 13 to 15 years of age, lying on her stomach, top of the bed. This is the part that unsettled me. Aside from underwear, as in panties, she's not wearing any clothes. And as a total stranger is at a wide open door, she makes no effort to conceal herself or even acknowledge my presence. She didn't seem to realize or care that she was half naked, almost like she was drugged. Then I noticed the woman on the chair as she periodically looks over towards me, totally aware of the situation. Then I noticed the man at the door, who at least 2 minutes after I arrived is still looking through his wallet behind the door. Or so I assume that's what he's doing. I got the feeling like he was stalling. He hangs up the phone and apologizes to me for the wait with a raspy, very creepy voice. I tell him the price and we exchange the food for the money. Between the exchange, I notice the girl on the bed turn to face me for a second. It's at this brief moment I was able to stare into her eyes. They seemed vacant and void of any emotion, like they had been stolen from her, like she was lost. She turned back to the TV without a single change in her face. The man notices I look at the girl, then turns and looks at her and back at me. He stares at me for a few seconds and asks me, "You sure you don't want to come in?" He said it with such a large but noticeably fake smile. I'm scared. It scared me and plunged me deep into a feeling of dread as my heart dropped. It was one of those moments where you know without a doubt that something is not right. Right would be an understatement, actually. This felt like an eternity of darkness overcame me, like some evil entity was piercing my soul. We made our exchange. Nothing more was needed. What did this guy want? I firmly declined his offer as I shook my head from side to side. He stared at me with that smile for a few more long seconds. The woman was still on the chair looking at me, and the girl was not moving on the bed. He stared, still smiling. "All right then. You have a good night," and closed the door. I stood outside the door for a minute, thinking I was in momentary shock. I put the money in my pouch, then headed back down the stairs. I informed the girl at the front desk about the situation, but I don't think she took it as seriously as I did. Maybe I didn't explain it as well for her. I exited the hotel, got into my car and began driving back through town. No music now. I needed a quiet moment, and decided for whatever reason to call my mum and explain the situation. I explained the delivery from hell to her, and she hastily told me to hang up and call the police. I did so but got no answer. I called my mum back and said I couldn't get through. She tried calling and I waited. It's been 2 days since that delivery. I apparently had a message on my phone but didn't receive it due to phone trouble from the police who were returning my call. They were interested in hearing my story and seemed pretty concerned. All the probable scenarios, both within the realm of reality and exaggeration, that could have happened that night, have been swirling through my thoughts. Did I make a choice that would have possibly saved my own life? And could I have indirectly witnessed the beginnings to something terrible? 4 years later now, and I always think about what could have happened to that girl. What if she was found dead 50 miles away and I never knew about it? Could I have done more to help? Did she even need help? Or was that whole night just one sick misunderstanding? I wonder what would have happened to me if I'd have got into that room. I hate visions of needles, knives, or blood, and cameras running through my mind. Just what on earth were those people doing? About 12 years ago, in a suburb of Baton Rouge, there was a suspected serial killer on the loose. The running joke in our store was that it was one of us because the murders were happening in and around our delivery area. There was a seedy motel by a remote industrial complex right off the highway. Everyone hated having to deliver there because it was mostly shady characters or truck drivers, and none of them ever tipped. I got stuck going there at around 11 p.m. on a Friday night. As I approached the room, I could see the door was slightly open. I knocked and said, "Hello?" and there was no answer. Through the crack, I could see a person sitting, so I nudged the door open a little. It was a frumpy, middle-aged naked woman tied to a chair, blindfolded and gagged. She nods, as if to acknowledge my presence, and turned her head in the direction of the nightstand. There was a note and some money on it. I scanned the room, and didn't see any sign of anyone else, i.e. the person who'd tied her up. I read the note, and it was something to the effect of, "This is our 20th anniversary, and this was my fantasy. Please look all you want, but don't touch, and keep the change. P.S. My husband is hiding and watching, so don't try anything." There was a $20 tip. I thought for sure this was my last delivery I'd ever be making. I snatched the money and left the pizzas on the bed, and backed out slowly. I have never been more creeped out in my life. Fortunately, there was no murder for me at that hotel that night. I am a pizza delivery driver. and this particular incident still perplexes me to this day. It was a late summer evening at 10:30 p.m., August 2 years ago, as I made my way through a wealthy neighborhood to deliver pizzas. The area was generally well lit, but there were patches of darkness throughout. I navigated through the apartment clusters and encountered one of those dimly lit spots where I had to rely on the headlights of my vehicle to locate the correct building number. My attention was completely absorbed in trying to find the right address, making me somewhat oblivious to my surroundings. Unbeknownst to me, merely 5 feet away from my vehicle stood 2 individuals in the middle of the street. To my surprise, they were completely naked. It wasn't an alarming sight, but rather one that left me utterly bewildered, and they seemed engrossed in each other's presence, exchanging glances without moving an inch. Although the sight didn't make me uncomfortable, it did raise numerous questions in my mind. Nonetheless, I had a job to complete, so I cautiously maneuvered my car around the motionless couple and proceeded towards the customer's location. Upon reaching the destination, I awaited the customer's arrival, keeping a watchful eye in my rearview mirror to ensure the naked couple didn't approach me or cause any disturbance. But as the minutes went by, and the anxiety grew, I was starting to get impatient, until finally the customer opened the door. I promptly handed over the pizza while maintaining a subtle vigilance towards this couple. As I left the customer's home and glanced back to the naked duo, they had vanished without a trace. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air, leaving me with no answers or explanations. They couldn't have gone anywhere that quickly, I'm sure of it. It will remain a mystery to me, and I wonder what the hell I saw that day. I almost got shot or stabbed or something while delivering pizzas. The area of town which the order came from was sketchy as hell. Let me give you a breakdown. It was a pretty meth-heavy area, plus the city where I attend college, pizza deliveries pay for rent you see, had been absolutely screwed over by Reaganomics and never recovered. Several mental institutions in the area were closed in the 80s, due in part to lack of federal funding, and the non-violent residents just sort of stayed around. Plus, manufacturing died, plus a chemical spill of some nature, plus poor infrastructure, blight in other words. It was quite jarring. I would deliver pizzas to one address where a toddler in a diaper gave me money because the only adult was nodding off in the corner from who knows what, and then go to a frat house where a bunch of kids from rich families on Long Island would drunkenly make fun of my uniform before tipping me an absurdly low amount, if anything. But that is just for context. I'm one of those people who was built rather large and looked as imposing as possible while wearing a Dominos uniform and have a resting "I want to die and take someone with me" face. So anyway, I get to where I'm going. I ring the buzzer and there's no answer, but the door is unlocked and it's an apartment building. And this isn't uncommon. So I walk in and am immediately greeted by a cacophony of yelling and screaming from somewhere in the building that gets louder the closer I get to the apartment. I knock on the door of the apartment and all of a sudden everything goes quiet. Really quiet. Eerily quiet. But no one answers. I am about to knock again and a guy comes from around a blind corner in the hallway. This guy's huge, at least 6'6", and 300 pounds, inked to the gills. Some of it identifiable as prison ink and gang tattoos. He has his hand inside his pocket. He looks at me and I look at him, and eventually after a few seconds he says, "Boy, you don't want to be here right now." I said, "Okay, thank you," left the pizza, walked as quickly as I could back down the stairs and back to my car. I genuinely did not believe he was messing with me, and I remain deeply grateful that he warned me that day to leave. I used to work closing shift at Pizza Hut. It was the site of the only unsolved murder case of my town. This kid, Randall, had been murdered closing a Pizza Hut and robbed. They didn't find him till morning. Anyway, all of us that worked closing knew it was haunted and Randall was still around. Well, one night it was just me and another closer when we heard footsteps above us and you could see the dust fall from the ceiling with each step. But no one was there other than us. We're closing shop, and I see someone standing at the counter wearing an old Pizza Hut shirt watching us, so I can tell him I'll be with him in a moment and grab my other closer who was watching the cameras. He never saw anyone come in or out, and the doors never dinged to alert us. We walked back out and he's still there, turn around to check orders and he's gone. I was pretty freaked out and my coworker was just like, "Well, now you've officially met Randall. He's a good ghost." Always say goodnight to him after that. I worked at Domino's, and we had to blacklist a guy because he was obsessed with me. He would come in and ask if I was there. If I wasn't working that day, he would just show up the next. If I was on a delivery, he'd wait around in the store for me. He wouldn't tell me that he loved me and asked me out on dates. He was very bad on heroin and made it obvious. The last time I delivered to his house, he ordered about $40 worth of food and drink and kept trying to hand me $100, even though I told him numerous times I didn't have the change. He apparently stole his grandma's cell phone and wouldn't give it back, and him and his cousins were screaming at each other the whole time I'm waiting to get the smaller bills he keeps telling me he had. He had nothing smaller than 100 and kept arguing with me because he changed his mind and just wanted one pizza and a drink, and I told him he couldn't do that. Safe to say, I really hope I never encounter this person in any other way again in my life. I was out of town on business, so I treated myself and ordered in from my favorite restaurant. Delivery guy arrived and insisted he had to come into my place to deliver the food to take payment. I had to loudly refuse this multiple times in the hope the neighbor would hear me, and kept insisting. Finally, I got him to process my payment in the hallway, but he was muttering under his breath the whole time. It scared the hell out of me. I double-locked the door when he left and sat up all night feeling uneasy. I wish I'd reported him to the restaurant, but I was too shaken to think about it. Years ago, I used to work for one of the major chain pizza places around. Near the end of the night, we would drop down to just the shift leader and 2 delivery drivers. One driver would do the first round of dishes, we called this the late driver, and then go home about an hour or 2 before closing depending on how busy the night was. Then, we would just be the shift leader and the closing driver, and we would do all the final cleaning and whatnot. Now, no one ever wanted to do the closing shifts really, because they wanted to come in during volume periods, make their money, then leave without doing the actual cleaning work that came with working till close. Except we had this one guy that was middle-aged, single, retired, military. The minimum amount of time required, and he was a very weird individual. As I learnt after working with him for a while, he also had extreme anger and aggression issues, quirks, pet peeves, and social behaviors. He was like the kid in high school that everyone picked on, but when one person tried to be nice to him, he either lashed out to make that person give up being nice, or got so weird that you regretted being nice to him. He also had a lot of very strong beliefs about how he should be treated when it came to customer interactions, and would be vindictive or passive-aggressive to people he believed had wronged him. The other people used to go extreme lengths to mess with this guy, because he had such dramatic reactions, and I felt terrible about them doing it to him, but also realized that he kind of deserved it sometimes, because he was the first one to try and screw with other people, because he felt like he deserved a better tipping address than someone else, because he would work harder or whatever as the closer, even though we check our runs by whoever was next on the screen. They would say, top driver, top delivery, meaning the driver that had to be back in the store the longest got the delivery that was the oldest, so that it would stay that way and be fair. Some of his issues. Number 1. If an order was $19.25, he would put the 75 cents in his hand before going to the door. If they tried to tip him less than $1, say they just gave him a 20 and told him to keep the change, he would try and make them take the coin saying, "No, thank you." Sometimes, if he was feeling extra saucy, he would say something like, "You might need it for another order." I cannot stress how much that chains add up to at the end of the night, especially if you're giving back 99 cents because of your pride and you can't accept it without that extra penny. One customer refused to take it from him one night, and he got so angry he threw the handful of change at the guy's door. The guy called to complain because he heard him do it, and he had change all over his porch, and the guy was written up. He got so obsessed with doing this, he actually brought one of those metal belt coin dispensers that you would push the lever in and it would pop out a coin. He would buy rolls of change off us just to keep it full. And when doing the schedules, we were just scheduled 1 hour past closing time because we were expected to take deliveries up until close. That keeps us accounted for labor for the delivery driver to make a delivery at close and have time to clean up. So the guy wanted a full 40 hours a week. Since he was scheduled, it was determined to work. If he saw that we were going to be out early, he would do something to cause a problem to make us stay later. He would bring a scrub brush from home and sit there and brush on every dish for a dramatically long time to waste extra time, to make it stretch so that he could be done closer to the scheduled time. If we were ready to mop up and leave 10 minutes to closing time, he would spill the mop bucket on purpose and then either try to take a whole hour to clean it up or take extra long, giving me his money to make up for the extra time by finding a discrepancy with his total, then conveniently figuring it out while it happened to hit the hour. When you cut a pizza, sometimes the pepperoni pulls into the cuts. By our guidelines, we're supposed to pull the pep out of the cuts so the pizza looks like it has the right amount of topping instead of the toppings being bunched up and crammed on the cuts. We just use the cutter to push them back. He was obsessed with using the tongs to do it instead, and would have a damn near mental breakdown and turn completely red-faced and start growling the longer it took if the tongs weren't out. The other guys actually hung them from the ceiling one day, about 12 foot off the ground, just to watch him freak out, and he had to go get the ladder to get them. I know this just sounds like a weird guy, but no one else wanted to work with him, and he wanted the shifts no one else got. So I got to work alone with him every night 5 to 6 times a week for months, despite me saying I felt unsafe with him. I was the one that was nice to him, so he kind of knew me as a friend, and I so regret being that person. If I mentioned liking something, he would go out of his way to bring it to me. Like one day, I had nice coffee from Starbucks, and I mentioned how much I loved the cups with the flat lids. So this guy actually went online and ordered a clear plastic cup with flat lids and straws, and brought them in so he could offer them to me. He tried to play it off as he just happened to have some and thought I might want one. I told him no, it's okay, I brought a cup, or I was just drinking out of a bottle. And he turned red and angry because I had turned it down after he had wasted his time and money ordering them. This was years ago when they weren't very common like they are now, which is why I was washing out the Starbucks one and reusing it that day. He had done it with a few other things. One day I mentioned liking Dominos pastas and said I wish we had pasta too. After his next delivery, he had taken way too long and I was confused where he was. He came back, had gone to Walmart, bought all this stuff to make pasta, including an electric kettle to boil pasta in, foil pans, pasta, all kinds of crap. He actually got set up on the delivery table and made enough pasta for 2. But I had eaten while he was on the delivery, and he again got upset when I told him I was too full for anything. He wouldn't speak to me for the rest of the night, and was slamming stuff red-faced the whole time. When a customer wanted to pay their order with a credit card, but didn't say that when the driver got there or changed their mind and wanted to pay with credit card at the door, he would have to call us and process it over the phone. He called me to do this one night, and I ran the card. He then asked me if I wanted to speak to the customer, and I told him no, why would I need to do that? He got very angry and said, "Gee, thanks," and hung up on me. When they pay over the phone, a credit slip isn't available. Delivery drivers are not allowed to suggest tipping in any way, and I hadn't thought about it. I was supposed to tell the customer, if you could sign the driver's delivery slip as a credit card receipt, you can add the tip and total there if you choose. But because I didn't do this, he wasn't allowed to say that, and came back red, snarling at me how I had cost him a tip. I told him, okay, sorry, I just gave you $5 extra mileage to compensate. But he was still very angry that he could have had the possibility of making more than if I'd have just left it up to the customer. He stomped around red-faced for the rest of the night. Then while I was sitting in the office counting down the cash drawer from the register, he just let out this insanely loud roar and threw a half-empty water bottle at the office window as hard as he could, promptly scaring the ever-loving crap out of me and making me hide with the door shut for the rest of the night. I also had a night where my boyfriend had come. We were having problems at the time and had discussed going to a 24-hour place to eat after work, as we closed at about 1 AM on weekends. We picked IHOP. We were going to sit down and discuss important relationship crap because we were very close to separating. We just discussed going to eat. It was already understood between me and him why we never talked about that, but the driver overheard us and actually followed us to the IHOP after work and tried to sit with us, like he was surprised to see us there. I got super uncomfortable, and my boyfriend gave him a very serious look and said, "I'm sorry, we're discussing some pretty important personal things, so tonight isn't the best night." He turned red and said, "Okay," and sat at the booth directly behind us and turned his music up as loud as he could. He used to wear these huge wireless headphones all the time, and we could hear his headphones blaring his music even though he was wearing them. When we went to leave, I tried to apologize to him that we weren't up for guests with us that night, but he closed his eyes, bobbed his head and ignored me till I left, and he didn't speak to me at work for about a week. I had tons of nights where he would get no tip on some order and have these supercharged rages, and stuff would just snowball until I was hiding from him wherever I could. I was afraid to clean the store too early because he would come back to the store about 15 minutes to close and see I had gotten everything cleaned up while he was gone, and would turn beet red and just lean against the wall fuming like a bomb. And I had to be alone with this guy every day for months. It got to the point on weekends that I was so scared of being alone with him. If it was slightly busy, I would either keep the other driver a little later and pay him extra money out of my pocket just to feel safe. He was my hero that got me through some of the nights working with this guy. Another night, I was there with another manager, and we were in the office looking at the numbers in the system. The other manager was also a guy. The driver had his phone hooked up to a speaker playing music through the store. The guy with me just freezes. His eyes slide out of focus and his mouth just drops. And he's staring at the empty space in front, almost drooling on himself, because whatever happened had him shocked and amused. He slowly turns to look at me and starts to laugh out this low, dirty old man laugh. I'm completely lost as to what's going on and ask him, "What?" Then he says, "You don't hear that?" I was so focused on his reaction that I wasn't paying attention to what was playing. Then I recognize it. I look up out the office door in time to see the driver making a beeline all red-faced to his phone, catches me looking at him, and just gives me this smirk. His phone was playing over porn, over the entire store very loudly, and somehow I didn't notice it. The guy also used to sit in the office when we were slow and would tell me about his sexual prowess because he practices Kegels, and how when he was overseas in the military, he had a girlfriend that didn't speak English, and he later learned she was a hooker. He overshared way too much information, it was terrible. He bragged about the Kegel thing like he was trying to interest me, and I never wanted to escape as badly then as I did even after all the insane rages. Once I quit that store, he got paired with a male manager. The complaints were taken seriously, and they finally fired him because he backed into a post in the parking lot of a strip club. The club didn't complain, but the stripper Cinnamon was notorious for not tipping. Irony. The girl would have her customers order her a pizza as a tip, and have them pay for it when it arrived. Since the pizza itself was a tip to her, they wouldn't tip the driver usually. This was the lowest class place you can imagine. While one of the customers had to call the store to pay with their credit card one day. When he didn't tip the driver, the customer was still on the phone with the manager in the parking lot, and the driver was raging so hard he slammed it into reverse and backed into a post and took off. The customer told the manager that they needed to do something about this guy and that he was going to severely hurt someone, and that he technically had just fled the scene of an accident, even if he had only damaged his own car and the post was fine. They fired him when he got back. All the time I was alone with this guy and all the weird stuff he'd done in the time I worked there, I hope no one ever has to suffer that again. I know I could have just quit, but I enjoyed the job, the pay was decent for my position, and I wasn't the one in the wrong, so I was being stubborn and wanted to see him removed before I could just give up, and was happy doing so. But in the end, I gave up and quit. No job is worth crying in the office for, and calling everyone you know to see if they can come hang out with you, just so that you can feel safe. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Hoping you enjoyed tonight's stories. You know what? After recording these, it actually made me really hungry, so I'm going to go have pizza with my family very soon, actually. In about 15 minutes I'm leaving to have pizza. So, there you go. The effect of the stories. Comment down below if anyone got food while listening to this. I'm interested to see if anyone had the same effect I did. So thank you for watching, I hope you liked it. I'd like to give a special thank you as always to my members and my patrons whose names are on screen. You guys are amazing, thank you so much for supporting the channel financially, it really means the world to me. So, I think I'm going to wrap things up here. If you want more content, links are on screen now, you just have to click it. Till next time, stay awesome, I'll see you in the next one. I'm going for pizza.